Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast, where we explore cutting-edge strategies to keep teams human-centered, drive innovation, and empower you with the tools and insights needed to help your team excel and thrive in today's rapidly changing world. Your host is Dane Grunewald, a seasoned expert with over 20 years of experience enhancing team dynamics and innovation. Today, Dane is joined by Ashley Jablow. Ashley is the CEO of Wayfinders Collective. There, Ashley helps individuals step off the hamster wheel, create a career and life they love, and learn to trust themselves along the way. She offers one-to-one and group coaching, workshop facilitation, and inspirational resources for individuals and teams. Tune in to discover, first, the 4-step process for innovation. Use the steps discover, define, imagine, and iterate to drive innovation and achieve goals, whether in personal growth, career planning, or team projects. Second, designing alliances. Set clear rules for collaborating by designing an alliance with your team. This encourages open feedback and keeps everyone aligned. Finally, harness self-awareness. Embrace your authentic self by recognizing all aspects of who you are. Align your work with your identity to enhance both your impact and fulfillment. So, teamwork makes the dream work, and we're here to inspire your next collaborative breakthrough. Gather your team or put on your headphones, and let's dive in together.
Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast. My name's Dane Grunewald, CEO of the Huddle 3 Group, and today I'm joined by Ashley Jablow. Ashley is coach and founder at Wayfinders Collective, and we've just had a great conversation pre-show. I'm excited to dive into some of these themes around authenticity and the whole self and energy in the way that we're doing teamwork. So welcome to the show, Ashley.
Thank you, Dane. I'm so glad to be here.
It's going to be a fun conversation. If we start, for the benefit of our listeners, it would be cool to hear a little bit more about how you came to be doing this work. So maybe you could give us a little more of your story.
Absolutely. Yeah. So hi, I'm Ashley Jablow. My business is called Wayfinders Collective. I wear a lot of different hats in my business, which is probably exactly the way I would want to design it. So I am a coach, a facilitator, an artist, an author. I have my hands in a lot of different pots. And if you had told me, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, that I'd be running my own business and that this would be the best job I could have ever imagined for myself, I absolutely would have laughed in your face. My story starts in the Bay Area. I'm from Palo Alto originally. So I grew up in really like the birthplace of Silicon Valley, that sort of rarefied air of everyone is a high achiever, everyone goes for the gold. And in fact, I went to an all-girls middle and high school where it was really ingrained in me that if I didn't want to cure cancer and be the first woman president of the United States, like naturally at the same time, then there was something wrong with me. And so I learned very early on, it was all about achievement, ambition, success. And I'm very fortunate in that many of the decisions I made, many of the goals that I reached for, I achieved. So I, went to university, worked in the nonprofit sector for a while, decided to get my MBA because I thought, again, that's what an accomplished, successful professional would do. Never mind that I can't stand math. And it was like 2 of the hardest years I've ever lived through. But while I was in business school, I got really interested in the world of sustainability and CSR. I started a blog, which probably dates me, although I think blogs are coming back. But I started a blog on the topic, and through that blog managed to kind of network my way into a job at IDEO, the design and innovation firm. And at the time, I knew nothing about design thinking or innovation. I knew nothing about consulting. And I was hired to essentially be the community and challenge manager for their crowdsourcing platform. And so I knew nothing about tech startups. And really, that's what it was. So I spent 4 years at IDEO drinking from the fire hose, learning the ins and outs of design thinking and innovation. That led me to the opportunity to serve as a presidential innovation fellow in the Obama administration. So I spent a couple of years kind of spreading the Kool-Aid, if you will, of innovation and design thinking inside federal agencies. Again,
Cool.
always kind of reaching for the biggest, baddest job title I could find. And after the White House, I joined a small Spanish design firm that was based in Spain. I opened up their first US office, and I thought I was just like at the top of my game, like I have arrived. And a little less than a year into that role, I got laid off very unexpectedly.
Oof.
And, I'd been unemployed before, but I had never been sort of involuntarily unemployed. And it was a real rug being pulled out from under me kind of moment.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting though, because of course I was looking for jobs, trying to figure out what I should do next. What I realized was that I had a set of tools in my toolkit, namely the methods and mindsets of design thinking that I could actually leverage for myself and use essentially a period of time to create my own design sprint, to sort of figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And long story short, really what it comes down to, and that I really believe in, there are 4 steps that whether it's people or teams need to run through and move through in order to create innovation, whether that's new products and services, new career plans, new life plans. And they are discover what's important, who I am, define what matters to me, what are my priorities, imagine a new future, what is that vision that I'm holding, and then iterate, take incremental, iterative action, experimenting, prototyping, all of that to move yourself forward. So when I got laid off, I basically ran myself through those 4 steps. And in the process, somehow decided to start a business, somehow decided to train as a coach. I started taking on clients. I started learning about being an entrepreneur. And like I said, 7 years later, this is the best job I've ever had. I love it. I get to work with the most amazing clients, organizations, teams. I get to work on creative projects and just kind of make up the rules as I go along, which is just amazing.
I love that. As a lifelong maverick, rules are there to be bent and potentially broken, but certainly recreated. And I think there's a real cool energy that comes with that, and clearly with what you're doing around design and change and transformation of people and teams and products. That's very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. I was just telling a friend the other day that so I'm actually a rule follower. I actually love rules. I love everything fitting into a neat little box.
Yeah.
And at the same time, one of my favorite, I think it's becoming like a favorite hobby of mine. I think of it sort of like a scavenger hunt for the rules that I didn't even realize I was living by. Oh, look, that's a rule. A great example, I realized the other day that I still, 7 years into entrepreneurship, I still live by an kind of unspoken rule that if I'm not at my desk by 9 a.m., then I've lost the day.
Yes.
Right. And I had to pause truly just a few days ago and think to myself, wait a minute, I don't have a boss, I'm the one who's making this rule. Why am I giving myself so much grief about it? So I'm still unlearning the rules, if you will, and creating my own, I guess.
That's fascinating. And in the world of coaching, I would imagine you look at some of those things with coachees around what's driving that. Is that an internal fear? Is it a personal value? Is it a learned behavior? And you almost need to kind of go back and do the root cause analysis before you can reprogram in some of those cases.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's hard to discern what is that root? Where is that coming from? And in my clients and certainly in myself.
Yes.
That's very true. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm finding right now that the field of coaching is really capturing a lot of my attention at work and at home, because we've all grown up with different lived experiences, and we've learned so many behaviors from those that we admire and from organizations and institutions and communities that we're a part of. But the world's changing so fast and humans are getting quite disconnected that I think the way to bring the connection back is that we're all doing our internal work to understand where those blockages are and to think about how we create, like you have with your business, Ashley, create the future and the conditions for success that actually, suit us as who we are and not, force us to follow a path that we thought we had to follow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm so grateful to have trained as a coach certainly because I love coaching and I love guiding people. And I love seeing the light bulbs go on when someone learns something new about themselves and then they're able to take that aligned action that reinforces that new understanding. And learning how to coach has made me a better human. It's made me learn and practice the skills of listening and of asking powerful questions. And just tuning into the energy and the people around me and being present in that. I truly believe everyone should learn how to coach, even if they don't want to become a coach.
I would agree. I think we should be teaching some of those tools and methods in schools even, because it's surprising whether you're using, there's different frameworks you can use, whether you're looking at personal values or if you're looking at, I like the internal family systems where you're which part of me is driving the bus right now? Because I'm feeling really angry and I'm thinking this way. And it's just like, oh, that's baby Dane. That's 7-year-old Dane who's afraid. I need to put him on the back seat and start thinking more as like adult, emotionally composed Dane right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. I guess I'm a lifelong learner in many dimensions, but especially in understanding myself. That's one of the things I've come to learn that I'm driven to know. Like you said, who is driving the bus right now? Who is making decisions? And who do I want in the driver's seat?
Yeah. And we've seen some cool tools out there. We've spoken about it with some guests on the show around like personal user manuals. So to your point of really knowing oneself, if you can then write a manual that says, hey, this is where I show up really well, and here's some gaps that you're going to have to keep an eye out for with me. And if you're experiencing this, here's a really good way to redirect me or correct me. Yeah. This is where I get my most energy in my work or the time of day I like to have meetings. The more we can be aware of who we are as people, and this probably goes back to your authenticity and whole self piece, the better we are at actually being team members.
What comes to mind is just the opportunity that each of us has when and if we're ready to take it, to really be honest about who we are. The user manual is reminding me of another series of questions and actually a tool I created back when I was unemployed and trying to figure out what was next. And I called it my personal inventory. And it was a series of questions that, and maybe we can even link to it so people can take a look at it. It's a series of questions focused first around my identity or a person's identity, and then next around their contribution. And so when I was unemployed, one of the things that became really clear to me was that I wanted to do work that encompassed my whole self. So at the time, I wasn't, just using air quotes, I wasn't just a professional or a designer or an employee. I was also a mom. I was a community member. I was an alum of the University of Michigan, right? I had all of these. I think about it if I had membership cards in my wallet, right? What are the membership cards that I'm carrying? And I really saw an opportunity for me when I got laid off to face those, to open up my wallet and say, where do I automatically belong just by being me? And that was a really It sounds like a simple question, but it's a really brave question, because so many of us, when we go into work, we put on a mask or armor or whatever, analogy you want to use, to hide parts of ourselves for lots of reasons, intentionally or not. And I was really committed to the next work that I do, I want to be my whole self. So even starting with that question of like, what are the membership cards that I carry? I'm a dog owner, right? I love I'm a journaler. I'm an artist. Like, starting to open up the aperture, because we can do work anywhere, right? And so giving yourself the honest opportunity to name, where can I just show up and be myself? Like, that alone was such a powerful question for me that I first asked when I got laid off.
Yeah.
And then the contribution piece, it's like connecting. So where do I automatically belong? Who accepts me just as I am, right? Then it becomes, well, where am I most uniquely positioned to contribute in a way that only I can? And again, the level of like brave honesty that's required to answer those kinds of questions, I think is such an important piece that I hate to see people skip over, right? So one of my favorite questions for that is, what do I do better than 9 out of 10 people? And really like pushing yourself to be honest about, what do I do better than 9 out of 10 people? And then who values what I'm great at and has the resources to either pay me to do it or to collaborate with me, right?
And let me do more of it.
And let me do more of it. Who wants me to do more of it? Exactly. I think self-reflection, introspection, like an honest examination of who I am as a whole person, I think that's just like the foundational starting point for individuals and even for teams as we're coming together to collaborate on something.
Yeah. In fact, I think the team plays a really important role there, because I've had moments through my career. In fact, I was doing an exercise with a team on site this week where you're head down, you're busy, you're not, your opportunity was really interesting. You were laid off, you had this time to go and do the personal inventory. But when you're just busy every day, you get out of your car in the morning, you go into work, you get the job done, you bounce off a few people, you go home, you cook dinner, you watch a show, you go to bed. You're not spending a lot of reflection time. Clearly, journaling can help with that. But your team members, when you actually take time to step away from the work, your team members often see things in you that you don't see in yourself, because they're like, hey, Ashley, you do this thing. The way you do that is just awesome. It lights me up. When it lights you up, I can see it. So I think that would be maybe a cool sort of 2.0 on the personal inventory. You kind of do it, and then you go into the team and say, what are you seeing? What would you pick from how I show up on the team?
Yeah, well, and what you're pointing to, Dane, is really, again, going back to these 4 steps. And this first one that I always start with is discovery. And like in product innovation, discovery can look like, user interviews or observations or, kind of going out into the world and discovering what the needs are. But what you're hitting on is so spot on for us as individuals. We can do our own discovery work, right? And some of that is the self-reflection. And some of that is also, just to your point, what do you see in me that I don't see? Yeah. Right? Like, how can I actually almost like get out from behind my computer and go have some conversations with people who know me and see like, what are the common patterns and themes here? This kind of knowing yourself work, right? The quest to like locate your authentic self and like name and define them. It's actually not just solo work. It's really better done in collaboration with trusted friends.
Yeah. And I guess once you have done that discovery and you start defining it and living by it, that's when you're doing the imagining, what kind of role I could do or what kind of project could I put my hand up for. And then you said the last piece was it ideation? So
Iteration actually is
iteration.
the fourth
Couldn't
one.
read
Yeah.
my own.
Yeah.
Couldn't read
That's
my own.
funny. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you go
Yeah.
discover, define, imagine, and then iterate. So that iteration is where you get that feedback.
Yes, absolutely. It's also the part of the process that I was the most uncomfortable with. The perfectionist in me was like, no, I want to keep all of my ideas and all of my work as close as possible. I will show you everything when it is complete and perfect and exactly the way it's supposed to be. And I've learned through trial and error that that's actually like the quickest route to having your ideas, whether they're ideas for your work and your team or they're ideas for your future and your life.
Yeah.
That's the quickest route to actually receiving all the criticism you don't want, right? When
Yeah.
you keep your ideas close to the chest. So learning to iterate, learning to show your work, learning to experiment out in the open. In the world of work, we might talk about wireframing or prototyping or mock-ups, that sort of thing. But even I use the example, if you think you might want to open up a restaurant one day, rather than quitting your job and going and signing a lease, right? Maybe you want to go to culinary school, right? But actually that alone is a pretty big leap. Like maybe you want to take a cooking class, right?
Yeah.
Or even smaller than that. Maybe you want to buy a cookbook and try a new recipe and see if you enjoy cooking, right? We can get so hung up on I need to know what my big vision is, but we can't actually and safely execute on that vision right away. We need to de-risk it. And so iteration, experimentation is the way that I found to do it.
That's very cool. It's great practical example too. Simon Sinek always talks about you have to start with the why. And he's got a point in the right context, but he's also really wrong in other contexts. So one of my former podcast guests, good friend, Dr. Ernesto Ciroli, he actually says, and I think it ties in with what you're talking about, Ashley, he's like, you've got to start with the who. Like, who are you? Who do you like to work with? And that's going to start to take you in the right direction. So to your point on restaurants, if my why or if my big passion is, hey, I love feeding people and I want to be social and that's going to be my why, I want to connect community. But then you realize that your who is, hey, I don't like to cook and I don't like to manage staff or to be at work until midnight. You might realize that your who and the why aren't connected, and the who is actually what you wake up and have to deal with every day. So it's probably a more grounded place to be starting from.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting that I'm reminded that we humans, we love a step-by-step process, right? And I even started with there are these 4 steps that I think everyone needs to run through. And I do believe in them wholeheartedly. And what I think you're making me think of, Dane, is the reality that there's always tension, right? And there's always ambiguity. So this notion of whether it's I want to open up a restaurant, so that's my long-term vision. So let me think about maybe I'll cook a new recipe this weekend. That's my short-term iterative action, right?
Yeah.
I was so that's one personal example. I was just working with a team facilitating a 2-day workshop with a global philanthropy, and they have this really big moonshot vision. And to your point of the who, they know who they want to serve. They also know themselves and the best role that they can play in creating change in the space that they're working in.
Yeah.
And there's a tension because they think it's going to take 10 years to reach this moonshot, right? To actually achieve the vision that they're working towards. And so their tension was, how do we hold this long-term vision and at the same time take action right now to build towards it?
Yeah.
And there's this sort of sense that if I expose a tension like this, it means I'm doing something wrong, or like I haven't solved it yet, like I don't have the right answer. And what I'm coming around to is that, in fact, that's just what it is. You like, part of doing innovation, being innovative at work or in your personal life, in your career, is
Yep.
making peace with the fact that there are going to be these tensions that rub up against each other, that I
Yeah.
can hold a long-term vision and also need to do something now. And I don't know if the stuff I'm going to do now is actually going to ladder up to that longer vision. It's really like murky, ambiguous
Yeah.
stuff that we have to wade through. And it's not always easy, but it's kind of the way that I've figured out how to do it. I don't know. Does that resonate with you too?
It really does. It actually makes me think back to that conversation we were having a second ago around the person having an idea and holding it close, wanting it to get right first. I think the tension is what creates the better ideas. It's what creates the movement. It creates the learning for the team, that epiphany effect of, hey, we came through a tough moment together. And I think if we can all create the trust, to your point, trusting in the iteration, then we're all going to be better for it. We're going to know what we like to do, what we don't like to do. We're going to know who we should be partnering with, who's already out there doing it. If we might, maybe we don't have to build it all of ourselves. Maybe we could just partner with another organization to make a big leap. But if you don't start trying, you're never going to find those gems.
Yeah. And how do you like reconcile the risk of it all, right?
Yeah.
It feels really risky. And it can be, it can be. And I've also found that trying things, experimenting with things, showing your work early, it's actually one of the best ways to de-risk something in the long term. Seems so
Yeah,
counterintuitive, but
it does.
yeah.
Maybe we could dive into that a little more, Ashley. So you've clearly worked in some very cool innovation, ideation, design environments. What are ways do you introduce constraints, or do you do certain exercises that allow you to live holding the risk in one hand, but knowing that you're going to go into the risk with a protective measure, so you don't kind of blow the whole budget or totally lose track? What are the tips and tricks there?
Oh gosh, well, I mean, let's just name, if I knew how to solve this, I would be a very rich person, I think. And I think there are some tips that immediately come to mind.
Yeah.
I think, again, back to this notion of being honest. I think the place I always want to see teams start, in particular, like I'm thinking about this team that I worked with recently, is having the honest conversation about the realities of the work that we're doing, right? There's a tendency, I think, again, going back to risk, that like, if we acknowledge this tension, it feels like it's a problem. It feels like we're not doing this right. And actually, it's exactly where we should be when we're getting started, right? So I think starting with like, let's be honest about the realities of the two time horizons we're holding, or of the fact that we have these really big goals and we're not exactly sure of the pathway to reach it just yet, like from, day zero. So that's the first thing. It's like just naming it. And I think as a coach, that's probably something I've gotten more comfortable with. It's something that I don't think typically teams are really ready to do or excited to do. It's like, let's name the elephant in the room, right? So that's the first. The other that I think immediately comes to mind, again, from a coaching context, I trained at the Coactive Training Institute. And when I was there, I learned one of my favorite phrases. Maybe you've heard of it. It's the idea of designing our alliance.
No, I haven't.
So designing our alliance. I think that, like, for me, I have always been much more interested in how people and teams work together and much less interested in what we work on. That's sort of always been my MO. It's like the the process we're going to go through is much more interesting to me than the widget we're going to build, I guess you could say. And so designing an alliance as a team, I think, is also a step that people immediately jump over because we got to get to work. We've got to do the thing. We've got to build, right? But the rules of engagement are really important to set. And I think they're going to be unique for different teams and different projects. But I think of them as sort of like the guardrails for how do we know how we're going to participate in this experience together. That could look like, the mile markers we agree to meet. That could look like the mechanisms we agree to around feedback or constructive criticism, right?
Yeah.
Even, again, from CTI learning the phrase permission to redesign, right?
Yes.
We always have permission to raise our hands and say, this is actually not working for me. Can we reset?
Yeah.
So I think those ground rules are really important. And another reason why I love it is because when we have an alliance, Dane, it's not just about like, what do I want or what do you want? It's about what are we working in service of, right? We have an alliance that's being built for the sake of something that we're creating together. And let's both pour into that. It both gives us direction and focus for those rules of engagement. And I think it makes it safer and easier if I'm doing something that you don't like, right? Or that's not working for you. You can say, hey, Ashley, I'd like to redesign this, not because I think you're a jerk, but because something's happening that's getting in the way of our shared vision and the shared work that we're doing. Right?
Yes.
So I love designing alliances. I do it with my coaching clients. I do it with my facilitation clients. Like I've done it with my husband. You can
That's
bet.
cool.
I have alliances everywhere.
Yeah. And it strikes me that documenting is important to that. You can't just have a verbal alliance because you don't have anything to go back and say, hey, we're off track or on track or we need to adjust. So
Absolutely.
How do you go about documenting that effort?
Oh gosh, I'm so glad you shared that, or you picked up on that, because I think it's actually a huge part of it. This is true for an alliance as well as like an idea. Like you and I might be, let's go back to the restaurant example.
Yeah.
I know what kind of restaurant I'm envisioning that I want to open, and you know what kind of restaurant you want to open, and we might be able to talk around that. It's like upscale, modern, luxury something, right?
Yes.
But what those words mean to me compared to what they mean to you, it likely means we're going to miss each other. There's going to be misunderstanding. But if I come to you with an image or even like a printout from a magazine, a tear out, like this is what I want it to look like.
Yes.
Immediately we're on the same page and we can evaluate like if we are in alignment, in agreement on what that restaurant should look like. And it's the same thing with designing an alliance. Like this is the alliance we've agreed to. Let's react to that, right?
Yeah.
Then with my coaching clients, we always document the design alliance. We always document actually most of the work that we do so that it becomes a reference point and we get into the habit of looking back at it. When I'm working with teams, I love to go analog. I love my flip charts and my markers, and I will have it up on the wall. And if I need to point to it and say, hey, remember this is what we agreed to. Right? And everyone can raise their hand and redesign if they need. But getting it out of our heads reinforces that alignment, and it also gives us something to hold on to that makes it so it's not personal anymore. It's like, again, in service of the work, in service of the idea, in service of the alignment and alliance.
Yeah. And making it not personal is powerful too. We've had a few conversations on the show recently and with teammates where it's like, it's so much more, it's not triggering if you go to someone and you say, hey, I noticed this work, I love where you're going with it, but it doesn't quite align with what I thought we laid out here. Can we explore it, rather than, hey, that wasn't good enough, can you go and rebuild it? Like, it just, you can take the feeling out of it and just be very matter of fact when you've got a good documented foundation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you have a template? So is it sort of like principles and ways of working, or is it more free flowing in terms of how you design that alliance?
So that's a good question. In my coaching engagement, so when I'm working one-on-one with someone and we are really designing, like, how are we going to work together, the framing that I use is in the form of requests. So is there, or are there, any requests that you would make of me or our relationship that would help you show up more fully as yourself in service of the goals that we've set for you?
Yeah.
Right. So I always have a couple requests that I always make as the coach. And then it's a conversation about what they need from me and what I need from them. With teams, it's interesting because now you're making me wonder about this, because I definitely have a point of view about what should go in that alliance when I'm working with teams. I will evolve it or adapt it based on, like, in all the pre-work that I do before I get into a room with a team. I want to learn not just what they want to get out of the session that I'm designing, but also, like, the energy and the dynamics that we're all going to be walking into. So often my client, like kind of my main point of contact, will help me understand if there are any specific requests that I want to come out of the gate and say, like, if a team culture is one where, like, we're very quiet, and we don't like to disagree, or we don't like to do anything that feels or looks like conflict, I might put in as a proposed part of our alliance that this is meant to be a conversation, right? And that I will invite people to speak if they don't want to talk, or if they haven't raised their hand. And I'm always clear that, like, that's not in service of me intentionally putting someone on the spot or making them uncomfortable. It's because we're here to have a productive conversation for whatever we're here to work on, right? So I'll often come with a set of proposed kind of agreements as part of the alliance, and then open it up. Like, what else do folks need in order to feel like they can show up fully? And that could look like how we participate. That could also look like, I'd really like to know when we're going to have a break. Or am I going to have to extrovert all day, or can I have some quiet time too? Right.
Yes.
It's a little different for teams, but it's still that same, like, what do you need to know about or clarify or ask for in service of showing up as your full self today?
I like that. And I like that example you started going down the path of, when people are a bit quiet, particularly if they're all peacekeepers, like they don't like conflict, because you need to, I guess, create into that alliance when you're designing it. Well, under what conditions are we going to bring conflict up? Because we can't just not have it. So it allows you to kind of create some intentionality there, I would imagine.
You're so right. And I would also say, so if I could wave a magic wand, I would say everyone should, I'm careful with that word should, but I do think everyone should be trained as a coach in some way, shape, or form, because I think it makes us better people, let alone better, like, supporters and advocates of change, and change of all kinds. I also think if I could add one more tool into everyone's toolkit, it would be the tool of facilitation, and having skills as facilitators and leaders of conversations, right? And even more so, like, to your point about peacekeepers, I think there's, like, what is our alliance, and how do we make that explicit and visual and visible, right? And then there's also, what's the best way to create that, like, container for this conversation to happen? So in a setting where people are all peacekeepers and we don't like to speak up because we don't want to step on toes or whatever, I might start with some solo reflection, like on
Yes.
Post-its, for example. Then let's see, what did people put on their Post-its? Maybe that will help kind of warm up the group to then speaking aloud. I think, it's easy, and so many of us are running so fast that it's like, we need to just have this conversation. We need, like, whoever will talk, will talk. That's what we want, let's just move it along.
Yes.
But just even a little bit of intentionality and planning and kind of designing what's the best way to bring out what we're hoping to hear and what we're hoping to surface and then co-create together. I just think I'm a big believer, I guess you could
I am
say.
too. Yeah, I was just looking up and I just pulled it up here, the Six Thinking Hats, De Bono's work. Had you come across that? So one of my teams there's lots of rainbows and unicorns in every meeting. Okay. Everyone's very positive. Everyone loves to go deep into the theory. And the downside of that is that sometimes we'll forget that actually we need to come away from this hour with a real action and outcome. We need to make a decision because as leaders, a big part of our job is to make decisions. So we've started playing with the Six Thinking Hats and saying, okay, you're going to wear the black hat and all you can bring is caution and skepticism to the conversation. Like, you're going to have to change your style here. And then, you've got the white hat, data, facts, information, be very pragmatic. And so by creating roles where, I guess in some ways unintentionally, we're designing an alliance for that meeting, not necessarily for how the team works all of the time. And I'm finding it's helping us just move through and actually have impact, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I'll just tip in, like, because I'm like a framework junkie. Like, I love all of that. And you're reminding me of another idea, both from the coaching world and also a book that I read. I think it's called The Alter Ego Effect.
Okay.
I want to say it's Todd Herman is his name. And he worked with high performance athletes as like a sports psychology coach. And what he observed was that the highest performing athletes, upper echelon, pro NFL, all of that, pro tennis, many of them had what he called alter egos. Like the first one I think of is like Beyonce has Sasha Fierce, right? When she
Right.
performs, she's not Beyonce, she's Sasha Fierce. And in research, both this author and just generally I've learned, like, you can perform better and differently when you adopt an alter ego. And so in coaching, that's a really powerful tool to say, like, what facet of me do I want to lean into? Do I want to emphasize in service of the impact I'm trying to create in my life or at my job, whatever it might be? And what you make me think of is when you're wearing the black hat or the white hat, you're essentially adopting an alter ego.
Yeah, you are.
It gives
Yeah.
you permission to show up differently than you would typically.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're seeing how liberating and generative that can be, which is so exciting.
It is exciting. And actually, I like this alter ego concept even more because we use the six hats in a meeting of a leadership team. But in theory, this could be very democratized. You could go out to anyone at any level, the accounting supervisor, the payroll clerk, the office manager, and you could say, hey, pick your alter ego here and turn up to this ideation session or this project. Let's go out and come up with some ideas.
Yeah.
And they're free from their day job and how they have to show up in their job. There's a lot of psychological safety that comes with that.
Yeah. I've used it. So I don't know if you can see, it's not great on the video, but I have a frame back here of a drawing I've done of all these different alter egos that I kind of own.
Cool.
That help me show up in different moments that I'll intentionally choose. Like, I'm showing up as my warrior goddess right now. And, what does that mean? Or as my appreciator, whatever it might be. But the same is true. Like I run brainstorms, like with this philanthropy I was at the other day. We were brainstorming in service of their vision, their moonshot, as themselves first.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, what if you were Oprah? Like, what if you were NASA? What if you were Target? Like, how would, if you could really become Oprah and you think about she's got a Rolodex to the stars, she has, her TV show, her magazine, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car, like the whole thing. How would Oprah solve this problem or imagine new solutions, right? And so alter ego is a really powerful concept that I think applies across scenarios and situations.
And what I love about that Oprah example, by reframing it, is it can actually help you work out who you need to team up with. Your team might be these people, but if you go into that alter ego reframing, you're like, well, actually, rather than doing all of this for ourselves and getting it done in 10 years, we could do it in 5 years if we could go and get a segment on Oprah's show or whatever.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It just takes you down very different pathways.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's cool. Well, we've covered a lot of cool ground here, Ashley. I really liked your 4 steps: discover, define, imagine, and iterate. I think they're powerful, like you say, personally and in a team. The personal inventory, we should absolutely share that link. I really like how you kind of look at that intersectionality of self and the membership cards, as you put them. That was very cool. And then sort of how you manage risk and how you encourage iteration in teams, so that people aren't kind of holding on to ideas, they're sharing, they're working together. I thought that designing the alliance concept really helps kind of build on that and create the safety. So that's awesome. And then those final 2 points that we touched on, like, let's lift everyone's capacity to coach and facilitate, because as teams, we all need to do more of it. And let's play around with some alter egos and maybe even throw a costume in there. That sounds awesome.
I love it. I love it. And that's a beautiful synthesis of our conversation, Dane. Bravo.
Thank you. No, it's all your good work. If any of our listeners want to find you at Wayfinders Collective and bring you in as a coach or facilitator or help them with some of their journeys, where do they find you?
Yeah, wonderful. Well, my website is a great place to start, wayfinderscollective.com. I would certainly welcome any invitations to collaborate, to explore potential working together. You can email me, Ashley@wayfinderscollective.com is fine. I also, if I could, Dane, I would love to just name, I have just recently published 4 reflection journals. And they combine my work as an artist and my work as a coach. There's a whole long story about how these journals came to be. But to your point about these 4 steps, discover, define, imagine, and iterate, these journals, each one tackles each of the 4 steps.
Very cool.
So it's called 100 Days of Designing My Life. And each journal includes 25 prompts to help you discover who you are and who you're becoming, define what matters to you, your priorities, your values, your boundaries, imagine new possibilities for your future, and then iterate your way towards achieving it. It's kind of like 100 days of coaching on your desk.
Love it.
And so I would really encourage folks to check it out. You can learn more at wayfinderscollective.com/journal. There's all the information there. And I would love to see them out in the world, in people's hands, to support you as you navigate change and do it authentically to you.
I'm going to get a few on order and get the team members trying those out. That sounds like a great exercise.
And there are even some prompts around designing alliances and alter egos. So you got it covered.
Cool. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for your time today. I'm excited to dive into those journals, and this has been really energizing. So I appreciate all of your insights.
Such a treat. Thank you, Dane.
Thank you for joining us. Remember that by embracing vulnerability, trusting our intuition, and approaching challenges with compassion, we not only strengthen our teams, but also pave the way for a future where collaboration thrives. If you're hungry for more insights, strategies, and research on collaboration, head over to thefutureofteamwork.com. There, you can join our mailing list to stay updated with the latest episodes and get access to exclusive content tailored to make your team thrive. Together, we can build the future of teamwork. Until next time.